Well, let me just summarize Jeremiah's life. And if you want, I've never gotten to do this with you, but turn back to Jeremiah 11, and you might want to jot some of these in, because I want to show you what enduring hope can bring you through. Now, most of us will never go through all this stuff, but I want to show you how much God did in Jeremiah's life, and you can just jot these into your notes somewhere. The whole 52-chapter book of Jeremiah chronicles the fact that Jeremiah's life was a failure. During his lifetime, everybody he preached to did not respond to him, and everybody he tried to get going the right direction went the wrong direction, and they finally were all killed by the Lord. So, from our perspective, his life was a failure. We never see any visible results. We never see anybody responding to Jeremiah. In fact, if you read all 52 chapters, it's the longest book of the Old Testament. It has more Hebrew words than even the book of Psalms. Jeremiah is a monotonous, long chronicle of failure. He preached, they rejected him. He preached, they despised him. He preached, they wouldn't listen to him. So that's Jeremiah. Chapter 11, verse 19, he preached for 40 years and saw no visible results. Jeremiah 11, 19 through 23 tells us. And so that means we can hope even when we feel like our life is a failure and when there's no results for all we try to do for God. God does not base our faithfulness and our reward on results. He bases it on whether we are hupomeno, whether we are faithful under the trials and struggles and difficulties we have to go through in life. Chapter 12, if you're in Jeremiah, verse 6, Jeremiah had no one to comfort him. His own family and friends were involved in plots against him. That's what 12:6 says. In chapter 16, if you go to verse 2, he suffered incredible loneliness. The Lord says in Jeremiah 16:2, you can't even get married. You may not have a wife. Now, there are a lot of people that can't find a wife, and they spend their lifetime searching. God says, you can't even look. You can't have one. Do you know what that means for a man who had no way to pass on his name? For a man who had no one to share his life with? He suffered incredible loneliness at God's hand. And why is that? To show that no matter how hard, bad, difficult, lonely, painful life is, that His mercy is new every morning, and we can hope waiting under by His power. It's not us. It wasn't Jeremiah. When you meet Jeremiah in heaven, you're not going to meet, Arnold Schwarzenegger, this spiritual giant, strength-wise and physically. You're going to meet a man who experienced more of God than most. Because you only get to experience God when you're thlipsis. You got your hand shut in the minivan door, when you're being squashed by life. That's when you experience God. We don't usually need Him in the other times. So that's what Jeremiah went through. Chapter 18, verse 20. He was under constant, all the way down through verse 23. He was under a threat of death. They were always plotting against him. That means we can hope even when we're close to death. Look at chapter 20. Turn over a couple pages to chapter 20 in verses 1 and 2. He had all this physical pain. Verse 2 says they struck him. They put him in stocks. That means they beat him up with rods and everything else and hit him. And then they would stretch him out in these stocks. And this hupomeno can help us even when we're filled with pain. We live in the most pain-fleeing society on the planet. America alone consumes more than half of all the pills in the world. We take a pill for everything. This morning, I was showing a few signs. Oh, you need to take this, you need to take that, you need to take this, you need to take that. We just think about that. And yes, we should, as needed. But Jeremiah had no pills to take to get rid of his pain. And he endured through the pain. Look at verse 10 of chapter 20. He lived with emotional pain, not just physical pain. His friends were mocking him on every side. We can hope even when we're sad and disheartened. Look at verse 14 of chapter 20, down through verse 18. He was consumed with sorrow and shame. He said, "Cursed be the day I was born." We can hope even when we're sorrowing, even when we just are so overwhelmed that we're just as David said, cleaving to the dust. By the way, nothing gets better in Jeremiah's life. You know how that's how most stories. We love stories that the lonely person, finds a partner for life, or the poor person strikes it rich, or the sick person gets well. Jeremiah's life, if you were charting it, went like this. It was a nosedive life. And by the time you get to 37:13, he was arrested, beaten, thrown into a dungeon, and almost starved to death. We can hope even when we find no relief. That's the good thing about God. God coming into your life doesn't mean the nosedive stops. It just means that God goes with you through the nosedive. And that's the thrill. It's not this opiate and this pie in the sky that you come to Jesus and everything gets well, because that's not the record of the Bible. Who, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. He didn't escape. It was the devil that wanted him to escape. It was Peter, the mouse of the devil, that says, don't let that happen to you. And Jesus says, Peter, get behind me, you devil. Don't tell me to leave the cross. Don't tell me, from human perspective, not to let my life crash. Jeremiah 37:15 through 21, he finds no relief. And I could go on and on. History records that they forcibly took him to Egypt, and there they killed him. Okay, so he died in Egypt with no relief. Okay?